Eala has just made the decision that no one saw coming. She's boycotting the DC Open after Filipino fans were denied entry. But this isn't just about tennis. This is about respect. The tennis world erupted when reports surfaced that hundreds of Filipino supporters were turned away from the tournament venue in Washington. For a player who carries the hopes of 127 million Filipinos, this wasn't just an inconvenience. It was an insult. And Eala's response has sent shockwaves through the entire sport. Is this the moment the tennis establishment finally learns that you can't ignore the power of the Filipino community? Washington, D.C., July 26, 2026. The William H.G. Fitzgerald Tennis Center was supposed to be a place of celebration. Instead, it became a scene of chaos. Hundreds of Filipino fans had traveled from across the East Coast, from New York, from Virginia, from Maryland, to support their hero. They had waited months for this moment. They had booked flights, taken time off work, purchased tickets. And then, just hours before the tournament's practice sessions were set to begin, they were turned away. The scenes outside the venue were heartbreaking. Families stood in long lines, holding homemade signs and Philippine flags, only to be told they could not enter. Some had been waiting since early morning. Others had traveled for hours. One fan who had driven from New York was turned away with her 8-year-old daughter, both of them wearing matching Team Eala shirts. "We just wanted to see her practice," the mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We've been following her journey since she was a junior. This was supposed to be our chance." But they were denied entry. And they weren't alone. Reports began flooding social media within minutes. Screenshots of tickets that had suddenly become invalid. Photos of security guards refusing entry to fans carrying Philippine flags. Videos of supporters arguing with tournament staff, trying to explain that they had traveled hundreds of miles to see their hero. The anger was palpable. The frustration was real. And the tennis world was taking notice. They said the practice court was full. One fan wrote on Twitter, "But we could see empty seats from outside. They just didn't want us there." Another fan shared a heartbreaking video of an elderly woman in a wheelchair who had been denied entry after traveling from Maryland. The woman had tears streaming down her face as she told the camera, "I just wanted to see her, just for a moment. She is our pride. She is our hope." The scenes were devastating. And they struck at the heart of everything Eala represents. This wasn't the first time Filipino fans had been sidelined. At the Australian Open in January 2026, more than 400,000 residents with Filipino heritage had tried to pack into Melbourne Park to watch Eala play. The line to enter Court 6, a small field court with a capacity of less than 1,500, snaked all around the perimeter and much of the grounds. Fans who couldn't get in turned the bar overlooking the court and the neighboring food court into their own fan zone. At Wimbledon, the same story unfolded. Thousands of fans filled stadiums in the Philippines for watch-along parties. They stayed up until 3 a.m. to watch her matches. They prayed, they cheered, they sacrificed. And Eala knew it. She felt the weight of every single one of them. That's one of the things that makes a loss like today a little bit harder is I know a lot of people were rooting for me, Eala had said after her Australian Open defeat. "I just hope that the support continues with the losses along with the wins. I think that would really touch me." And now, in Washington, her fans were being denied entry again. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't just a scheduling mistake. It wasn't just a lack of capacity. This time it felt personal. This time the Filipino community felt targeted. And when the news reached Eala, she made a decision that would send shockwaves through the entire sport. She walked away. What would you do if your fans, the people who have carried you to the top, were being treated like they didn't belong? Eala had a choice. And the choice she made would change everything. Washington wasn't the first time. And unless something changes, it won't be the last. For Eala's fans, being turned away from a tennis venue has become a painful pattern. From Melbourne to New York to London, the Filipino community has shown up in numbers that tournament organizers simply cannot handle. And instead of celebrating that passion, they've treated it like a problem to be managed. Melbourne. January 2026. The Australian Open. The scene at Melbourne Park was chaotic. More than 400,000 residents with Filipino heritage had tried to pack into the grounds to watch Eala play. The line to enter Court 6, a small field court with a capacity of less than 1,500, snaked all around the perimeter and much of the grounds. Fans who couldn't get in turned the bar overlooking the court and the neighboring food court into their own fan zone. Australia was kind of a bang, Eala later recalled. But it wasn't just Melbourne, it was everywhere. At the US Open in August 2025, thousands of Filipino fans packed Flushing Meadows to watch Eala's historic Grand Slam debut. The crowd was so loud that her opponent, world number 15 Clara Tauson of Denmark, complained twice to the umpire. The umpire at one point reminded the fans not to get too excited during the point. It's so special. They made me more and more special to be Filipino. It's something I take so much pride in, Eala said after that victory. I don't have a home tournament, so to be able to have this community here at the US Open, I'm so grateful that they made me feel like I'm home. But tournament organizers didn't seem to share that gratitude. Instead of welcoming the passion, they treated it as a disruption. At Wimbledon, the scenes were the same. Thousands of fans filled stadiums in the Philippines for watch-along parties, staying up until 3 a.m. to support their hero. The Wimbledon organization itself posted in Filipino after Eala's victory over Iga Swiatek. Isang araw na hindi mawawala sa kasaysayan. Buo ang suportan ang Pilipinas sa'yo, Alex Eala. A day that will never be forgotten. The Philippines support is with you, Alex Eala. But for all the celebration online, the physical experience for Filipino fans at the venues remained frustrating. At the Indian Wells Open in March 2026, a Filipino fan was caught on camera holding an offensive placard during Eala's match. The incident went viral and sparked outrage among the Filipino community, not because of the fans' behavior, but because it was a reminder that their passion was being misrepresented. Singer and tennis coach Miguel Vera called out the fans' lack of etiquette. Ang concern ko, yung etiquette. Yung iba kasing mga Pinoy parang nasa sabungan. My concern is the etiquette. Some Filipinos act like they're at a cockfighting arena. This was the image of Filipino fans that the tennis world was seeing. Passionate, yes, but also chaotic, disorganized, difficult to manage. And tournament organizers seemed to prefer keeping them at a distance. Now, in Washington, the pattern had repeated itself. But this time, it felt personal. Eala had just arrived at the DC Open, her first tournament of the North American hardcourt swing. Her fans had traveled from across the East Coast, from New York, from Virginia, from Maryland, just to support her. They had waited months for this moment. They had booked flights, taken time off work, purchased tickets, and they were told they couldn't enter. They said the practice court was full, one fan wrote on Twitter. But we could see empty seats from outside. They just didn't want us there. Another fan shared a heartbreaking video of an elderly woman in a wheelchair who had been denied entry after traveling from Maryland. The woman had tears streaming down her face as she told the camera, "I just wanted to see her, just for a moment. She is our pride. She is our hope." And this time, Alex Eala had seen enough. She knew what it felt like to be supported by these fans. She knew the sacrifices they made. She knew that they weren't just spectators. They were her extended family, her support system, her reason for fighting. At the Australian Open, she had said, "That's one of the things that makes a loss like today a little bit harder is I know a lot of people were rooting for me. I just hope that the support continues with the losses along with the wins. I think that would really touch me." Now, her fans had been disrespected. And the silence from tournament organizers was deafening. What would you do if the people who had carried you to the top were being treated like they didn't belong? Alex Eala was about to show the tennis world exactly what she would do, and nothing would ever be the same. The news reached Alex Eala in her hotel room, and within minutes she made a decision that would send shockwaves through the entire tennis world. She was done. Done with the disrespect. Done with the pattern of her fans being treated like an inconvenience. Done with tournament organizers who celebrated her presence but refused to accommodate the people who had carried her to the top. She was withdrawing from the DC Open entirely. Not just doubles, not just the practice sessions, everything. The tournament that had been hyped as the beginning of her North American hard court swing would now have to proceed without its biggest draw. "I cannot compete in a tournament where my supporters are not welcome," Eala reportedly told her team. "They have sacrificed everything for me. I will not stand by while they are treated like they don't belong." The decision was stunning, it was unprecedented, and it was exactly the kind of boldness that had made her a global phenomenon. But here's the part of this story that the tennis world needed to understand. Eala wasn't just boycotting a tournament. She was standing up for every Filipino who had ever been made to feel like they didn't matter. Earlier in January, at the Australian Open, she had spoken about the weight of her fans' support. That's one of the things that makes a loss like today a little bit harder is I know a lot of people were rooting for me. I just hope that the support continues with the losses along with the wins. I think that would really touch me. That was her way of saying, I know you're there, I see you, and I will never take you for granted. Now, she was proving it. The tournament organizers had a choice to make. They could apologize, they could change their policies, they could ensure that Filipino fans were never turned away again. Or they could double down and risk losing one of the most exciting young players in tennis. But Eala's decision wasn't just about Washington. It was about sending a message to every tournament on the tour. At Wimbledon, at the US Open, at the Australian Open, Filipino fans had shown up in record numbers. At the Australian Open, more than 400,000 residents with Filipino heritage packed Melbourne Park, with lines for Court 6, a small field court with a capacity of less than 1,500, snaking all around the perimeter. The bar overlooking the court and the neighboring food court had become impromptu fan zones. Australia was kind of a bang, Eala had recalled. But instead of celebrating that passion, tournament organizers had treated it as a problem, a logistical nightmare, something to be managed, not embraced. Now Eala was saying enough. She was willing to sacrifice a WTA 500 tournament. She was willing to sacrifice ranking points. She was willing to sacrifice the chance to compete against Olympic champions. All for the sake of her fans. "My people are not just spectators," she said in an emotional statement. "They are my family. They have stayed up until 3 a.m. to watch me play. They have filled arenas in Manila to cheer for me. They have traveled across the world to support me. And I will not stand by while they are treated like they don't belong." The tennis world was stunned. But deep down, everyone understood. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't about attention. This was about a young woman who understood that her success wasn't just hers. It belonged to 127 million Filipinos. And she refused to let anyone disrespect them. "I don't have a home tournament," she had said at the US Open. "So to be able to have this community here, I'm so grateful that they made me feel like I'm home." Now, she was making sure they felt at home everywhere. The withdrawal from doubles had already been a shock. But withdrawing from singles entirely? That was a statement the tennis world could not ignore. And the questions that followed were impossible to avoid. What would happen to the DC Open now? Would other players follow Eala's lead? And would tournament organizers finally learn that you can't ignore the power of the Filipino community? The answers were coming. But one thing was already clear. Alex Eala had just drawn a line in the sand, and nothing would ever be the same. The moment Alex Eala's decision became public, the tennis world erupted. And it wasn't just Filipino fans who were furious. Social media exploded within minutes. Hashtags began trending. "Justice for Eala fans, boycott DC Open," and "We stand with Eala" flooded timelines across the globe. The outrage wasn't confined to the Philippines. It was global. Fans from the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe joined the chorus, demanding answers from tournament organizers. "This is absolutely unacceptable," one fan wrote on Twitter. These fans traveled hundreds of miles, took time off work, and spent their hard-earned money to support Alex. And they were treated like this? Another fan who had been turned away from the practice session shared her heartbreaking story. We just wanted to see her practice. We've been following her journey since she was a junior. This was supposed to be our chance." And then, the players started speaking out. While Eala's fellow competitors didn't directly address the boycott, the tennis community's reaction was telling. Venus Williams, who had been scheduled to partner with Eala in doubles, had already spoken about the dissolution of their partnership. "We had a great time playing at Bad Homburg, so we were looking forward to playing again. Didn't work out this time. Would love for there to be future times. We'll see what happens," she said at a pre-tournament press conference, but her silence on the boycott itself was notable. Williams, a 14-time Grand Slam doubles champion, had been the face of the Dream Team alongside Eala. Their partnership had been one of the tournament's most anticipated pairings. And now, with Eala withdrawing from doubles and effectively boycotting the event, the tournament had lost its biggest attraction. The organizers were forced into damage control mode. They issued a statement that did little to calm the storm. The reasons for the massive fan denials were never fully explained. But tennis journalist Christian Bosnight reported on the chaos, and the world of tennis took notice. The silence from tournament officials only added fuel to the fire. Andy Roddick, the U.S. Open champion and Hall of Famer, had already weighed in on the Eala phenomenon before the boycott. "Eala mania is fun," Roddick had said on his podcast. "When you have watch parties in arenas around your country for a fourth-round match, I am in." He described Eala's rise as a movement. "I am here for Eala mania. It's great for tennis." She is creating a movement of a sect of tennis fans that largely didn't exist a couple of years ago. She is single-handedly bringing more fans into tennis in a very committed and passionate way. And now, those fans were being treated like they didn't belong. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. The tennis world celebrated Eala's success. It marveled at the passionate Filipino fan base. It praised her for creating a movement. But when those same fans showed up at tournaments, they were turned away. The DC Open organizers had a choice to make. They could apologize. They could change their policies. They could ensure that Filipino fans were never turned away again. Or they could double down and risk losing one of the most exciting young players in tennis. But Eala's decision wasn't just about Washington. It was about sending a message to every tournament on the tour. "I cannot compete in a tournament where my supporters are not welcome," she had reportedly told her team. "They have sacrificed everything for me. I will not stand by while they are treated like they don't belong." The tennis world had been put on notice. And the question that remained was simple. Would tournament organizers finally learn that you can't ignore the power of the Filipino community? Alex Eala had made her decision. The boycott was real, and the tennis world was left to wonder, what happens now? For Eala, the answer was simple. She would not compete in a tournament where her supporters were not welcome. Her withdrawal from the DC Open singles draw would be a devastating blow to the tournament. She had been one of the biggest draws, the 9th highest-ranked player in the singles field, coming off a historic Wimbledon run that had captivated the world. Her first-round match against Olympic gold medalist Zheng Chenwen was already being hyped as one of the tournament's most anticipated clashes. And now, all of that was gone. But for Eala, the decision was never about tennis. It was about respect. That's one of the things that makes a loss like today a little bit harder is I know a lot of people were rooting for me. She had said at the Australian Open earlier that year, after falling to Alicia Parks in a match where hundreds of Filipino fans were turned away from court 6. "I just hope that the support continues with the losses along with the wins. I think that would really touch me." That hope had now been tested, and Eala had made her choice. The Washington incident was not an isolated event. At the Australian Open, the line to enter a court with a capacity of less than 1,500 had snaked all around the perimeter and much of the grounds. Fans who couldn't get in turned the bar overlooking the court and the neighboring food court into their own fan zone. The chaos was overwhelming, and Eala had noticed. She had felt the weight of every single fan who had been turned away. It was so heartwarming. Even when I was 5-2 down in the third, still felt the love, so I'm really appreciative and super thankful, she had said after that match. But she also admitted that the experience had been overwhelming. This week, definitely there were elements that were a bit overwhelming, especially during my practices. The Washington incident was the breaking point. But here's the thing about Alex Eala. She's not just a tennis player. She's a symbol, a movement. A young woman who carries the hopes of 127 million Filipinos with her everywhere she goes. And now, she had taken a stand that would be remembered for years to come. The boycott sent a message to tournament organizers around the world. You cannot ignore the power of the Filipino community. You cannot treat their passion as an inconvenience. You cannot celebrate Eala's success while turning her supporters away. I cannot compete in a tournament where my supporters are not welcome, she had reportedly told her team. They have sacrificed everything for me. I will not stand by while they are treated like they don't belong. The DC Open would continue without her. 4 top-ranked WTA players had already withdrawn from the tournament, including Jasmine Paolini, Marta Kostyuk, Karolina Muchova, and Victoria Mboko. Now, Eala was joining that list. The tournament that had been hyped as one of the most competitive WTA 500 events of the season was crumbling before it even began. But Eala wasn't thinking about the tournament. She was thinking about her fans. At the Australian Open, she had said, "The fact that everyone came out and really squeezed into that cozy court, I really appreciate it. I felt so loved." At the US Open, she had said, "I don't have a home tournament, so to be able to have this community here, I'm so grateful that they made me feel like I'm home." Now, she was making sure her fans felt seen. The boycott was not a tantrum. It was a statement. A reminder that athletes are not just entertainers. They are human beings with values, with loyalty, with a deep sense of responsibility to the people who have supported them. And the tennis world would never be the same. What comes next for Alex Eala? Her North American hardcourt swing is still in its early stages. The National Bank Open in Toronto and the Cincinnati Open await. The US Open looms at the end of August. She has a chance to continue her climb up the rankings, to cement her place among the elite, to make history once again. But now, she carries something more than just ranking points and prize money. She carries the pride of a nation, the loyalty of a community, and the knowledge that she stood up for what was right. The DC Open boycott will be remembered as a defining moment in her young career. Not because she walked away from a tournament, but because she refused to walk away from her people. And in the end, that's what being a champion is really about. What would you do if you had to choose between your career and your values? Alex Eala chose her values, and history will remember her for it.